when we're talking new narrative, you travel the world, you identify stories on the ground around tourism, package them, and hopefully position them. So where does this fit in?
It makes perfect sense when you live in the media world and having sat through and have it explained in detail. But the challenge from a media perspective is, how does the media take this and communicate that to the end consumer? And I think that's the challenge. The conversation, the plan, the description there is excellent. And I love the fact that we finish with explore, because that's what media want to do. But that's the challenge. And I think what brands need to do is understand what's happening in the media world. So from where I'm sitting, we've just entered stage 3 of travel media. So when I started 20 years ago in this space, the travel editor was king. The travel editor curated content, the travel editor decided what content was published, and destinations had to work with editors. Then 10 years ago, we entered stage 2, which was bloggers, and bloggers then, they were the curators, and everybody could create content, and it was an open door, all content was available. And now we're entering stage 3, which is AI, where there is no author anymore. So chatbots decide the answers or the content that's served to the consumer. So this morning I did a search on ChatGPT and looked for restaurants here in Punta Cana. I got an excellent set of results, but there was no author, there was nobody behind it, there was no curation, there was no editing. It was just content that was brought together by AI. Where it came from, nobody knows. Was it good or bad? I don't know. But that's where the consumer is going. They're going to start using chatbots. So Bing, for example, have already incorporated it. Google are catching up with Bing. So we're now in a stage where tourist boards have the challenge, which is, who's publishing this content? Where is it coming from? And can we engage with it, or can we manage it? And if there is content that is, let's say, incorrect in a magazine or a newspaper, you can contact the editor and they'll make the changes, they'll edit. Likewise, you talk to a blogger, you can point out where there might be, an issue with a piece of content, but with a chatbot, you can't do that. And that makes it incredibly challenging. The answer is journalists have never been more important. So content creators, journalists, but good content creators and good editors.
And here I thought that the time of added value for information generation was over. And it was more the container rather than the content, which is relevant, because this is how you get the big bucks for advertisement.
But I think trust is important. People want to know where the content is coming from, who the author is. So it's the why, not the where, is important. Why is that journalist traveled? Who is that journalist? What's their background? Why are they writing about this topic? I think it's an opportunity for destinations and DMOs to work more closely with journalists, but they have to do more work to actually validate who those media are, because they don't have editors anymore to say this is a good journalist.
Now, how to ensure, we were talking about new narratives. UNWTO is not really in the branding business. We're in the tourism for development business. This is the mandate of the organization. And we're trying to broaden and enrich the narrative around tourism precisely to highlight that. How do you navigate that when we've just heard from the experts, from Interbrand, on really the value, and you were talking about stage 3 tourism journalism. I'm paraphrasing this for what Borja presented. It's stage 3 brand, so it's now brand and leadership, right? So there's a certain correlation with that. So what do we do with this? Or are you proposing that you're a gun for hire?
So there's a perfect link to the presentation we've just seen from Interbrand. It's the final point, point 6, explore. That's what media want to do. I think the stage or the day of the heavily curated press trip is over. It doesn't work anymore. Editors don't want content that they've seen 1,000 times before. They don't want to see an itinerary where the same places are visited again and again. The best press trips I've been on in recent years or recent months, and the best press trips I've been involved in, is where the media have time to explore and create their own stories, create their own content. So an example, a trip I did last year, it was a 6-day trip. The first 3 days, it was a lightly curated itinerary where the destination was introducing the journalists to what was available, what they could explore, what they could see and do. And then the last 3 days, based on what the journalists had seen the first 3 days, the journalists could choose for themselves what they wanted to go back to, what stories they thought were interesting, what people they liked, what they wanted to find out more about. the content produced from that was some of the best content I've ever seen. So explore, to go back to that point there. I think you need to give media time to explore, to find those stories. But the work of the tourist board has got harder than ever in that they need more resources to audit and validate the media that they're going to be working with. You still need to take a lot of time as a DMO or a destination to find good media to do that.
Now, before I move on to Pedro to talk about strategy, because this overall it boils down to strategy, how do you ensure, Michael, that media doesn't really partner with brands, right? The role of media is to be that neutral instance which ensures the checks and balances. How do you navigate that? How do you make how do you balance it out? Whilst searching, for a relevant, meaningful story. And again, this is like a mantra. We're talking here, I want to always go back to the field of tourism for development.
Soft sell. Hard sell doesn't work. So media don't want to be sold to, and they will see very quickly if a brand is pushing a brand message. Soft sell, the opposite works. So I was on a sustainability press trip last year, and the destination...
Was it sustainable?
Almost. But the media, the destination was very clever. They said to the media day one, this is the first time we've done a sustainability press trip. We're new to this. We're learning. We're on a journey. We'd like you to come on that journey with us. So they were open, honest, and upfront with the media. They weren't hard sell. Therefore, the media were immediately on side. From day one, they were on side. So again, it worked. Now, that said, sustainable tourism or media to date, the challenge has been any trip I've been involved in or on, the DMO is inviting specialists in sustainable writing and tourism. Whereas in fact, for us to really engage with sustainable tourism, I think mainstream media, everybody has to be on those press trips. It can't be just the specialist media. But soft sell, to answer your question.
Is this the right strategic approach? The soft sell, Pedro? Is this what, again, with the very comprehensive presentation we witnessed, so you're not talking really about the brand, are you? The brand just comes in through the back door.
Well, I think definitely you need to, the soft sort of sell, it's very important, but when you think of, and again, I think the media has a critical role to play in sort of, I wouldn't call it positioning, but rather bringing awareness to certain destinations and certain brands. But we need to understand that we need to build those brands around people. So the communities, right, of those destinations are critical in that process, and maybe it hasn't been the case always. So if we want to tell stories, we have to tell stories about people and about communities, right? So how you engage not only consumers, but the people that are going to be directly impacted by that tourism is critical. So as for the role of the media, I think it's critical in those new narratives and portraying tourism in a different way and a different light, and the impact that tourism generates in destinations and to communities. But at the same time, I think brands have a responsibility to be developed around and created around people and communities. And to your point, I think I'm myself a backpacker. When I was studying, I had the opportunity to visit a lot of countries in Latin America, and what I think was most compelling of those destinations were the people, right? I was talking to a colleague from Mexico last night, and he was telling me about this industry in a village in Mexico that they do toys. And I think it was a fascinating story, but he told us it's not that well known, right? So I think brand is less about talking and more about doing. So I think portraying a message, it becomes harder because I think consumers, I think just detect very, very quickly when they are being sort of doctored or it's being a tailored messaging approach.
We had the first mover advantage. Borja mentioned first mover advantage. We had the first mover advantage because we were the first out of 4 blocks at this session. Okay, we started late. We need to call this a wrap at this stage. Of course, feel free to engage as we move on. But then again, both of you have addressed from your perspective and respective angles DMOs, for those not familiar with our acronym words, Destination Management Organization. So those promoting actually destination. So what would be your message to them? How do they how can they engage in this in a meaningful way, in a relevant?
I would say people first, right? Communities, people that are going to be working in the industry in your country, and consumers. And I think if you bring them to the table in defining those brands, you will be successful. If you're empathetic and you're able to meet customer expectations, not just from a demand perspective, but rather your value proposition, what you bring to the table has to be about people. And destination obviously has to be the weather, the sun, the beach. It's phenomenal, and Dominican Republic is the perfect example of that. But ultimately, and I would say firstly, if you want to develop a brand for the 21st century that is truly relevant, has to be about the people, through and through, end to end, people first, and then brand, because brands they need to appeal to everyone in the value chain, and that's critical.
Thank you, Pedro. Before I'm losing here my papers, my notes, strategic notes. And to you, Michael, you mentioned media trips, which used to be one of the resources to really amplify the message. You mentioned what media trip you would attend, okay, when you can really craft the agenda, identify what's interesting. Which are the ones you would refuse? What should DMOs not invite you to attend? Because at times, and this is our experience in UNWTO, and this doesn't necessarily relate to tourism, but the freebie is not that attractive anymore. Free travel, accommodation, etc., that doesn't ensure any coverage at all. So, okay, having said that, so that's the wrong answer because I preempted that. What's the media trip you would not attend?
So the really good journalists that I work with, or the trips that I go on, are the trips where it's solo travel. So the really good media who produce great content in great publications with great audiences, they're doing trips by themselves now. They're not doing the group trips anymore. There is still a place for the group trips, but the best examples and the trips that work the best are where you're asked as a journalist, what would you like to do? That's it, no more. And the journalist gets to curate or at least engage and talk to the destination, say, well, this is what's of interest to me. This is who I am as a person. This is my heritage, my background. This is my voice, my audience. This is what I'm interested in. And the reason I go back to media being so important and dealing with the issue of AI, because it's amazing what's happening at the moment, is a chatbot or a chat tool or GPT cannot convey emotion or happiness or joy or an experience.
They're getting better at it.
I hope they don't get to that stage, but they are getting, and it's amazing what's happening. But I think only a good journalist can do that. And that's what sells. So in terms of soft sell, if a journalist is talking about an experience, an emotion, happiness, and people that they met, the brand benefits automatically without even having to mention the brand.
First.
100%.
Okay,
Always.
All right. So you can work for Interbrand now. So thank you very much. Thank you, Borja, down here. Thank you. Please, warm round of applause for Pedro and for Michael.